Hi, welcome back guys, this is your friend, WTFW with another fiction. What if Deku become a plastic man now? Before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Not all men are created equal. Dream big, but make sure your dreams are attainable. These were sayings that Izuku Midoriya understood far more than most would give him credit for. At the age of 12, he understood these concepts better than most adults. Probably thanks due in part to one of the guys currently chasing him. Get back here, Deku. Katsuki Bakugo had once been his best friend. Now, he was his number one bully. And all because Izuku was quirkless. Quirkless. Oh, how he hated that word. Quirkless. The condition given to those who were not born with a unique, superhuman ability. Like Bakugo's own explosive sweat, or Inko, Izuku's mother's attraction ability. In the world he grew up in, quirks made your life. They were the key to an easy life where you could use them freely to get work done. Especially if you wanted to be a hero. Hero. Those who have full permission to use their quirks in order to protect the civilians of the world. The one occupational dream in this world. For if you became a hero, as long as you fought villains and saved people, the government paid you handsomely. And oh, how Izuku wanted to be a hero. But not because of fame or the money. Oh no. Ever since he was 3 years old, when he first saw a video of All Might, the one hero in the world, save 1,000,000 people with a great bug smile on his face. Izuku had wanted to be just like that. Someone who takes away people's fears, never backs down from a fight, and makes people's day with his mere presence. Someone who would just as easily get a cat out of a tree as they would stop a robbery. It was his dream, and with his mom's attraction and his father's fire breath, Izuku was certain whatever quirk he'd get when he turned 4 would make him a great hero. Sadly, it was not to be. On his 4th birthday, a doctor callously and bluntly told Izuku he would never have a quirk. All because he was missing a joint in his toe. His dream was cracked, but not shattered. After all, there was no rule that said a quirkless person could not be a hero. It was also the only thing Izuku had ever wanted in his life. To be someone who helps others. That wasn't too much to ask and aim for, right? Wrong. No one believed in Izuku's dream, getting him mocked and bullied. Especially by Bakugo, whose quirk was hailed as amazing and great, filling the explosive blonde with grandeur. Things only got worse when he proved to be brilliant at everything he did. Most of the dissenters of Izuku, or as Bakugo called him Deku, stuck to merely laughing at him and pointing out how unlikely it was he'd ever become a hero. However, Bakugo seemed to have made it his mission to hammer into his childhood friend that his dream was unattainable, and not through the kindest of methods either. He refused call him anything but that nickname, would threaten to murder or beat him if he stepped out of line, and the worst part, no one did anything about it. Because Bakugo was smart enough to mostly do this when no one was looking, and Izuku would sooner die than rat out the boy and ruin his dream of becoming a hero. Which brings us to this moment. Here Izuku was, running from yet another attempt at education. This time, however, would prove to be the last and quite different. Just give me the notebooks and I'll piss off, Bakugo demanded. 2 goons behind him chuckling in anticipation of the coming beating. Come on, Ka-chan. I worked really hard on those, Izuku begged, shifting his backpack so that it was protected by his back. It's for your own good, Deku, Bakugo smirked. Hey wait. One of the goonies noted. Isn't this the industrial part of town? His friend stopped when he realized that the shining gleams of downtown were nowhere to be seen instead. Fading paints, cracked walls, smog, and warning signs. Bakugo paid this no mind, delighting in how close he was getting to Izuku. Get back here, Deku. Even without the volume, Izuku could feel his friend's breath and the heat of the explosions just inches away from burning him. In no mood for either, Izuku threw his bag over the first fence he saw and clambered over it, then racing towards the nearby factory. Bakugo would have followed after his pre-pal. Yeah, that was the word, pal. But he saw several warning signs and finally realized the point his thugs had mentioned. He growled and turned around. Come on, guys. Let's scram before someone else finds us, he ordered. If I get caught for trespassing, no way UA will let me in. And with that, they traced their steps back to downtown, leaving Izuku out of their minds. Meanwhile, Izuku was catching his breath and patting away the sweat that had amassed while he had been running as he hid behind a panel of sorts. He honestly wasn't thinking straight, just glad that he had avoided Bakugo. A few minutes later, when his attacker had not found him in the usual time, Izuku stepped from behind his hiding place and got a good look at his surroundings. A chemical factory. Mostly automated, but a few assembly lines and dirt on the floor gave the impression a few people worked there at least. The temperature wasn't too high, so Izuku wasn't sweating anymore, and whatever they were making hopefully wasn't too bad. A bit of steam alerted Izuku to look down. He saw a bubbling vat, next to which there were a few barrels, some of which were not clearly sealed. Making a mental note to avoid that, Izuku glanced at his watch. He was now 10 minutes late than his usual home arrival time, and if Bakugo was anything like he knew, he probably had given up chasing him to get home before Aunt Mitsuki gave him another lecture. And speaking of mothers, Inko was probably going to be worried sick when he got home. I better get home. Who's there? Panicking as was in his nature, Izuku slipped on his shoelaces and found himself plummeting towards the green pool below. He flung his backpack away and tried to shift his way, thankfully avoiding the vat, but falling onto the aforementioned improperly sealed barrels. As the green fluid seeped over Izuku's skin and into his pores, he paid it no mind, more focused getting out of here without being seen. As he scrambled to get out of the green liquid and clear his eyes, he felt his hand brag onto a handle, which it pulled, letting outside air grace his wrist. The next thing he knew, Izuku was outside and running all the way back home, his clothes dripping and smelling funny, but he himself unharmed. He then hauled himself home, later telling his mother he accidentally stood against some wet paint while watching a hero fight a villain. And thus, his life was still the same. At least, so it appeared. What he didn't know was that he had been caught on camera. But that's for another time. MHA. That was a year ago. Life had continued on for Izuku. He'd go to school, get humiliated by Bakugo and the others, do his homework, read comics and watch heroes in action. Then he'd have a nice dinner with his mother, who'd applaud his brilliance and worry about why he tensed somewhat whenever he heard Bakugo. A not too bad life, right? So why did he feel so empty? It was the beginning of his final year of middle school, and Izuku had done some soul-searching. Bakugo and that doctor were right. He had known, but held on to hope he was an exception. He could no longer do that. How does one react to that? Knowing your only dream is out of reach, being bullied and wanting to not bother anyone. Not that many would care when you're a second-class citizen. There really was no other choice, in Izuku's mind. He was standing up on the school's rooftop, a written confession for why. He hoped this way he could at least prevent someone else in a situation like him from repeating what he was about to do. Mom, forgive me. And with that last thought, he willed his body to jump off. The wind pelted his form as he fell, just as a sense of regret filled him. He suddenly didn't want to do this. It wouldn't be fair to Inko. He could be a police officer instead. Hell, he'd never kissed a girl yet. Izuku suddenly realized. He was then pulled back from meeting the dirt, rocking up and down. Opening his eyes, he saw he was indeed going up and down. What? From the corner of his eyes, he saw the answer, making his eyes widen and all sound around him go mute. His feet were still on the roof, and his legs were stretched to an unbelievable length, beginning to slink up and down ever so slightly. Suddenly, just as he thought of returning to the roof, His arms followed in the example of his legs, and Izuku found himself being flung back towards the roof at an incredible speed. He hit the rooftop with some impact, but it barely felt like anything. Readjusting himself, Izuku was then treated to the sight of his limbs zipping back to their normal length. It took him a few minutes to realize what had happened. He could stretch. Quirkless people couldn't do that. He had a quirk. He had a quirk. For a good few minutes, he sat on the roof, his systems rebooting. Izuku Deku Midoriya had a quirk. He responded with a loud declaration, an infectious smile on his face. Oh my God, I'm so happy. This is the greatest day of my life. He raced home, ignoring a battle between Endeavor and a water monster, along with Miku and Mount Lady, stopping a building from falling onto civilians. Mom, he called out happily as he entered his home. Sweetie? Inko Midoriya asked, intrigued what had her baby boy in such a good mood. Look. Izuku, from the entry, reached for the fridge to help himself to an all-right sports drink, his arm cutting off Inko from interfering and allowing her to gawk as her son grabbed the drink, opened it, and wheeled his arm back. I have a quirk, Izuku declared with happiness and pride. I can strength, recoil, and I can bounce off damage. Probably going to need to test that out. Also need to figure out if I can fold like Edgeshot or flatten like Tiger. How? Inko was happy for her son. Elated even. She thought that Vogely, someone in her family, had a similar quirk, so perhaps Izuku was going through quirk avatism. But then she realized that there had to have been something to force this quirk to awaken. And they had been through all the tests. Izuku? When did this happen? Can you think of anything odd that happened recently? Her questions brought her son out of his ramble, only to begin another one. This Leda quirk needs something to activate. But Tay usual bullying never did anything. Bullying? Inko asked. I didn't eat anything out of the ordinary or do anything different in gym, so strengthening is out of the quest. He then recalled something. Maybe it was the goop in the factory hat Ka-chan and his pals. Izuku? He stopped rambling to see his mother, her eyes wide open, pointing at him in shock. The boy then turned to a nearby mirror to see Bakugo standing where he should have been. Shocked, he winced, as did Bakugo. Immediately, he knew something was up. Bakugo never winced. Izuku thought to shake his hand. Bakugo followed. Izuku stuck out his tongue and Bakugo followed. He titled his head, and, you guessed it, Bakugo followed. Double wall, what the heck? I thought I could stretch. He clamped his hand over his mouth. He even sounded like Bakugo. Inko promptly acted like many other parents would in this situation. She fainted. Mom, Izuku hollered in worry, his voice and form returning to normal. MHA. Okay, people, now that we got all the drama out of the way, let's cut to the chase. My name is Izuku Midoriya. I fell into a vat of chemicals that gave me a power unlike all the other heroes in my verse. And this, the story of how I became a hero. A piece of flaming debris went flying as a green-haired blob emerged from the fallen building, opening up to reveal several civilians and a smiling, freckled face. Met my best friends. In a diner not too far from Ua, Izuku sat at a table, laughing alongside Shinsho Hitsohi and Yui Koda. Fell for the most amazing girl in the universe. Underneath the starry sky, and with the knowledge that their classmates safe and sound, Izuku's lips finally made contact with Mina's, their eyes closing and fingers running through wet hair. Saved Japan. Izuku wrapped his form around the tuxedo-wearing man, then turned his legs into springs that pushed them skyward before he spun like a top and, stretching his arms to their utmost limit, slammed his idol's foe into the ground. America. Izuku twisted from a slinky-like form and delivered a powerful punch to the glowing cowboy with floating dollar signs around him. The legendary supervillain skidded back before whipping a lasso at the young hero, who shifted into the form of an eagle and slammed into the villain's face, and made a lot of people laugh while doing so. Stretching and squishing his face in outrageous ways, Izuku smiled at the hordes of beaming civilians, both children and adults. After taking a few selfies with his adoring public, a proud smile on his face, he bounced onto the top of a building before stretching his legs to walk from rooftop to rooftop without any problems. A year later, Izuku sat at the back of his class, anticipation on his face. It was time for career aptitude tests. Or at least that's what was supposed to happen. The teacher had just thrown them away, because he knew all the students in his class wanted to be heroes. Sensei. The man turned to see Izuku, his neck stretched out, and a disapproving look on his face. Don't want another incident, do we? Izuku smirked knowingly. Just cause everyone wants to be a hero doesn't mean they can't have backup plans. But of course, it is mandatory. Sensei wisely added and picked up the forms, splitting them between the 4 lanes of desks. Take 1, pass it back. Izuku simply stuck his tongue out the now growling students. He no longer cared about what they thought of him. They had mocked him repeatedly, done nothing to enforce the rules about using quirks in class. And besides, forgive him for sounding like Bakugo, but none of their quirks were beyond sidekick level. He shuddered at that thought, then distracted himself by remembering the past year and how that fateful day had changed everything. Once Inko regained consciousness, she moved and acted with a speed and passion Izuku had not seen in a long time. The last he recalled was when she was at a once-a-decade sale and wanted to get a very rare pair of earrings. His mother had demanded to know what had happened the night he had been muttering about, and for once, she refused to let him leave Bakugo out of the story. Suffice to say, Inko was not happy with what she learned and got on the phone with Bakugo's mother, her best friend Mitsuki. The Bakugo matriarch was not happy. Actually, to say she was pissed off beyond measure would be putting it lightly. She had angrily confronted her son and then pulled him out of school for 3 days to lecture his ear off and make it clear that this time he was not getting his way. Her son's remarks about Izuku being worthless did not help, although it did divert attention off him for a day. When Inko found out that the school had failed to act on or outright ignored the bullying her son went through, on top of mocking his dreams and ideas, she became a force of nature that Izuku was both enthralled to brag was his mother, and yet extremely grateful she was such a kind-hearted and patient woman. Long story short, Inko filed a lawsuit against the school, and won. The story surprisingly became huge news, with the entire nation following it and many applauding when the Midoriyas won. The teachers were simply suspended without pay for a few months, and Bakugo's goons were expelled due to other bullying they did whenever Bakugo wasn't around. And as for Bakugo himself, flashback. I can't sign this, Izuku had said. The paper in front of him, if he signed it, would ban his childhood friend from ever taking a hero course at any school. Izuku didn't think his friend deserved this. He'd make a great hero one day. They had sworn it as toddlers, and said boy glaring at him had nothing to do with his thoughts. Oh, who was he kidding? Bakugo's stare could make villains piss themselves. Inko's passionate and rage had died down at this point, so she was torn between ending the madness and taking her son home to his favorite food, or demanding he sign it so that they could leave. Perhaps unsurprisingly, it was Bakugo's mother who stepped up to the plate, silencing her son with a glare. Now you listen here, Izu. She had butted in. Katsuki needs this. He wants to be a hero. Then he has to learn that actions have consequences. Besides, this'll probably humble him a bit, and no real hero would do anything like that crap. She then forced the pen into his hand and practically forced him to sign the paper. No sooner had he done this, a sense of relief and surprisingly vindication came over him. Altaf, he felt terrible for feeling it. Damn it, Deku, Bakugo shouted as he leapt towards the object of his hate. his palms exploding in his rage. "Katsaki!" the two mothers shouted, Inko trying against all hope to pull her baby boy out of harm's way. Izuku rose his hands up to try and limit the impact of the explosions. But then something unexpected happened. For some reason, Izuku clamped his hands onto Bakugo's. They then poofed upwards, and then deflated to their regular size. For a good few minutes, now one said or did anything. Izuku opened his hands and gave them a look aside from some ash and soot. They were fine. And it didn't hurt nearly as much as before. Izuku's face broke into a smile of relief and happiness, leaving him open to another attack from Bakugo, who never got the chance. Another explosion to greet his face and send him rolling to the floor. It was his father, who had used his own quirk to strike his son down. "Go to your room," Masaru demanded of his son, an uncommon look of rage on his face. And for once in his life, Bakugo obeyed. A shocked silence fell over the room. Masaru definitely was not the most violent or outspoken Bakugo. But for him to do that, hell's temperature must have dropped a full Celsius. I am so sorry," the man began. "I just wanted." He was cut off when his wife planted herself onto his lap and wrapped her arms around him. "Oh, Masaru," Mitsuki cooed sensually, batting her eyes. I think we should leave." "Izuku," a blushing Inko teethed. "Good idea, Mom." Her son followed in suit, and they raced back home as if Injunium himself was chasing after them. 9 months later, Bakugo would have a little sister. Flashback end. Bakugo had become far more subdued since then, avoiding Izuku at nearly any cost. Not out of fear or shame though. Just pure rage and seething hatred. Now that he couldn't become a hero, he was now determined to become a riot or bomb squad cop. No way he could become rich and famous doing those right off the bat. But he would now settle for legendary status. Izuku couldn't find himself able to care all that much about this anymore. Now that he had a shot to become a hero, he had to figure out how this new power worked within the next 10 months. While he had aced the pre-exams for UA, everyone else had had years to master their powers, while most would have called this a fool's errand. But Izuku was not one to be deterred easily. Besides, now he had help. As school was let out for the day, a car or hero was familiar with drove up, and a man who looked like a rugged, older Izuku with shorter hair, a stubble, and in it professional clothes pulled the window down, blowing out some fire. "I see ya, Dad." Izuku smiled. Most kids his age might have been slightly embarrassed being picked up by their father, but not Izuku. Hayashi Midoriya had been working overseas for most of his son's life. But now, he was here to stay and determined to do whatever he had to do to make up for all those missing years. The second Izuku's power had awakened, and during one of her calmer moments, Inko had informed him what had happened. Hayashi had outright begun booking a flight home and turning in a resignation after his boss refused a transfer to a Mustafa branch, and then made a comment how Izuku was nothing of importance while trying to get a contract. Hayashi had blew fire onto his face and walked out, luckily getting home the next day. He held no regrets. "Good day at school?" he asked his son. "Not too bad. Had to remind sensei about following protocol," Izuku admitted. "So, why the pickup?" "I'm not complaining, but usually I walk no problem." A small part of him was also hoping to get to see some cool hero action on the way home for his hero journals. "Well, you remember Mr. Ishido?" Hayashi asked his son. Apparently, the man who his company had been trying to contract with had seen the scuffle Hayashi had been having with his boss and offered to give Hayashi a lift back to Japan, as well as declining doing business with the company. His reason: he was a father himself and refused to do business with someone who would so callously put profits over family. Over the course of their flight, the two men had shared stories about their kids and had agreed to meet for lunch. "A little," Izuku started, only to realize what was going on. Wait, don't tell me. Yep, we are now legal partners, Hayashi beamed. He invited us over for dinner tonight, and before you ask, yes. Yes, you are going to have to actually wear a suit. No morphing clothes this time. I wasn't going to suggest that. Izuku weakly denied. It saves money. Your mom's orders, Hayashi explained. And all argument died. We still going to? Izuku started. Tomorrow, bright and early, Hayashi promised his son. Thanks to his dad picking him up, Izuku was spared a rather unsettling encounter with a muck monster, who was captured by All Might around the same time they arrived home to get ready for their evening out. MHA. The Midoriyas came to a medium-sized house with a 2-car garage and backyard. Now, since the lawsuit, the Midoriyas were not hurting for money. They were not rich by any means, but had enough to indulge and entertain the idea of buying a small house. Once Hayashi gained steady employment, which was now the case. Hayashi, glad you could make it. A very alien-looking man with blue skin, black and yellow eyes and a single glowfish-like antenna atop his head, beamed when he answered the door. The two men hugged and chuckled as they patted each other on the back. No alien act, Hayashi teased. Wife's orders, I assure you. The host explained as he heard footsteps. Speaking of whom, next to him now stood a very beautiful woman with no noticeable alien features aside from pink hair. Rat went down to the small of her back. In her arms was a baby boy with blue skin, wearing almost the same clothes as his gather. Welcome come to Casa di Ashido, Midoriya. My name is Maji Ashido. The man smiled. This is my lovely wife, Mia. Hello. The woman smiled, adjusting the toddler in her arms. This is our youngest, Gordon. Inko and Izuku immediately cooed at the toddler, who smiled shyly before retreating into his mother's neck. Just then, a tall young man with pink hair, older than Izuku by a few years, came downstairs and slipped on a jacket. Our oldest Naji, Maji smiled, who has a previous engagement and will not be joining us. Naji simply waved hello before heading to the garage. And our baby girl will be down shortly, Mia explained, motioning them inside. Well, Maji, Mia, Gordon. Hayashi smiled, motioning to his family. This is my beautiful wife Inko. The Midoriya mother blushed at her husband's praise, getting a chuckle out of the other couple. And my son, Izuku. Hayashi beamed. Hello. Izuku answered shyly, suddenly nervous. This was the man who had brought his father home, and from what he knew, was the vice president of a company of renown. Ah, the famous Izuku, Maji smiled, shaking the boy's hand. Pleasure to meet you, my boy. Your dad's told me a lot about you. You want to be a hero, right? Izuku's nervousness began to vanish. Yes, sir. That I do. My daughter wants to become one as well. And with your quirks, I bet you two will be great. And there was his key. Speaking of which, if you don't mind, Izuku started. Not at all, Mia beamed. Your father told us about your journals. We'd be delighted. My quirk enables me control the temperature of what I touch. And I can turn anything into candy. Maji beamed with pride, pointing to his now glowing Athena and then pouting. Though I can't often control what kind of candy I get, stupid fruit roll-ups. And you use that to terrify your workers. Mia added. I don't terrify, Maji denied. I motivate. Hayashi whispered to his wife and son. He does terrify them. Izuku had already jotted down some notes into a mini notebook, and was so engrossed that he didn't sense someone sneaking up on him. What you got there, broccoli? Izuku yelped and bounced upwards, his arms wrapping around a rail for dear life. He then looked down at the speaker, and soon his cheeks matched what he saw. Pink. A pink-skinned girl his age, with hair not unlike his own and eyes very similar to Maji. but also with horns on her head. She had an athletic and attractive figure with somewhat broader shoulders. But what drew Izuku most was her smile, so warm and welcoming. "You okay up there?" Izuku had never talked to a girl before. Never mind a pretty girl. With a cute smile. Blah, Izuku tried to say, his pink cheeks turning red in embarrassment. The girl simply giggled, picking up his notebook and offering it back. Untangling one of his arms, Izuku took it and gently plopped himself back down to the ground. Thank you, Izuku bowed repeatedly. "I'm sorry for my action." The girl giggled again. "It's cool, dude, don't worry." "Mina, please don't sneak up on guests." Mia sighed, her infant son giggling. "Sorry, Mom." Mina apologized, then offered her hand to Izuku. "Name's Mina Ashido. What's your name?" His face still blushing, Izuku gently took the hand and shook it. I Izuku Midoriya," he hurriedly replied. "Nice to meet you, Ashido-san." "Oh, no need for that. Call me Mina, please." The parents chuckled at the scene before a rumbling came and Gordon began to cry. "Oh dear," Nia noted, trying to coo her baby as the teens walked forward. "Gordy, it's okay." Mina cooed at her baby brother Beofer, covering her face. "Hey, where did Mina go?" She then opened her face, with her tongue sticking out, but to no avail. Izuku then stepped forward and started making funny faces at the baby, squishing his cheeks and sticking his tongue out. Gordon soon stopped crying and burst into laughter as Izuku began dancing like a monkey and offered a stretched out finger for the baby to play with. Seeing this, Mina did a handstand with one arm and mirrored Izuku's movements. Soon Gordon's rumbling tummy was all forgotten, the toddler laughing at his sister and the boy who was visiting. "Well, if Yua doesn't work out, I can always become an entertainer," Izuku mused. The parents smiled in pride of their children before Maji's stomach growled. Dinner. It turned out to be a very fun evening. The parents shared stories while Mina dragged Izuku off to show him around. It turns out she too was a rabid fan of sci-fi movies, in particular the Alien franchise, mostly because of her acid quirk. So much so that she planned on becoming the heroine Alien Queen. After seeing that movie with that character, Izuku wouldn't sleep well. But he did admit one thing. "Well, you're certainly prettier than the Kuyo god." "Did I say that out loud?" "Oh, you think I'm pretty, huh?" Mina teased with a smile and then a laugh. "Relax, Izu. I'm taking the compliment, don't worry. Sides, you're pretty cute compared to the other stretching or shape-shifting heroes I know." Izuku's face exploded into another blush, and he began to mumble, getting another laugh from Mina. Soon enough, though, it was time to call it a night. "Wait a second," Izuku begged his folks. "Mina, are you going to the UA entrance exam?" "Darn tooting," she beamed. "You?" He nodded. "Well then, see you then." Izuku simply smiled and nodded back, not noticing the knowing looks his parents were giving him. Back at the Ashido residence, Mina admitted to looking forward to seeing Izuku again. MHA. Testing the limits of and training his new power proved to much more trickier than Izuku had thought. His thoughts seemed to be what triggered the changes in his form, oftentimes before he had time to prevent or cancel them. The time he had turned into a car was a particularly bad memory in his mother's eye. And not an inanimate car, no. Give him a person and Izuku could turn into a flawless copy, provided it seemed he heard them speak. But when it came to vehicles, his face and clothes were still there. Porinko had fainted the few times he tested this at home, and Hayashi was pretty darn sure he'd seen those in his nightmares. Needing to get their boy out of the house, the parents had suggested doing some light cleaning up garbage-filled streets for a start. But then, an idea came to Hayashi. A beach filled with garbage would make a great place to work. Now, he did have ulterior motives for this. This was the same beach he props to Inko on. and he was 90% sure it was also where his son was. Well, Izuku had loved the idea, and starting from then on, for a few hours before and after school, he would go down to said beach, morphing his form into various pieces of said garbage, or otherwise rounding it up to be taken away, which built it up and or revealed that he was now very strong, easily able to lift a washing machine over his head for a while. The boy had actually found an abandoned jeep there and even started to practice how to drive. After scaring his parents a few dozen times, he got it down. Then had come the second stage of his plan, removing all the garbage before the UA entrance exam. There was just one problem. He didn't have a driver's license. Having narrowly avoided for now, at least getting in trouble for trespassing in the events that seemed to have given him this power, Izuku was in no rush to test his luck if a cop pulled him over. Luckily, having both parents had an unforeseen benefit around this. Hayashi was more than happy to help his son out. In fact, they ended making some good money selling back certain bits of junk, 90% of which Hayashi donated to charities his son out. The other 10% spent on family dinners out. As stated previously, the family wasn't hurting for money, but they never forgot what it was like to have expenses. About a month after dinner at the Ashidos, Izuku had started to be able to shift his hands into hammers and drills, which he used to break down garbage. Kiddo. Hayashi mused suddenly. Punches are cool and all, but you can't tell me that's all you're going to be doing, right? Izuku blushed. Well, fists are usually used in fighting, so yeah, maybe some kicks. But All Might uses those smashes. But you're not All Might, or Edgeshot, or Tiger, Hayashi said, quickly patting his son on the shoulder to get his attention. His next words filled with support. You're Izuku Midoriya. You shouldn't try to be anyone else. Now, I'm not saying you can't take inspiration from them. But Izu, you're way smarter than most folks around here. Certainly me. Don't follow the crowd, stand out. Be smarter than the smartest and tougher than the toughest. And before you say anything, you already are. He then let out a breath. Sorry, kiddo. Got a little carried away there. He sheepishly noted, before adding, you do what you think is best, sport. I just want you to be the best that you can be, and I'll help in any way. The words sunk into the boy's head. And remembering the full extent of his quirk so far, shapeshifting, stretching, shock absorption, super strength ideas began to form. Hayashi handed his son a notebook and watched as he jotted down ideas. They then continued for another hour before a great booming laughter caught their attention. Well, what is this? Cleaning up the beach for a bonding experience. Good to see old-fashioned heroism live on. Their jaws dropped. No sound came from them. It was the #1 hero in the world. All Might? The Midoriya father and son shouted in shock. All Might? The Midoriya father and son shouted in shock as it dawned on them that the Herculean, blonde #1 Japanese hero stood in front of them with his signature grin on his face. The very same, just out for a morning jog. The #1 hero answered proudly. When I happened upon the sight of two civilians doing a great service that it appears only 4 kind has not forgotten, I just had to investigate. I hope I'm not intruding. Oh no, not at all, Hisashi quickly said, trying to keep himself from fanboy. My son and I are just trying to. He lost his train of thought, and his along with his son's spine began to tremble when All Might's tone changed. While it warms my heart to see you do some good for your community, I must remind you that using your quirk so freely is illegal. His jovial tone then returned. But then again, it seems to me that your son. What is your name, young man? Izuku Midoriya, sir. Young Midoriya, forgive me for being blunt, but it appears as though you're trying to figure out your quirk. Izuku hung his head in shame and looked down at his feet. I'm a late bloomer. Izuku explained. My power just manifested a year ago. This got All Might's attention, but he held his tongue and let the lady continue. At first, I thought I could just stretch, but it turns out I can shapeshift and mimic people and objects too. And with the courses for high schools coming up. You want to go to UA, correct? All Might guessed, getting a nod. I want to be like you. I want to become the greatest hero, like you. A smiling, dependable, cool hero. That's what I want to be. That's why I'm giving it everything. I know it's probably a long shot, but I have to at least try right. A feeling of déjà vu overtook All Might, his talk with his master, all those years ago, filling his head. It's been my dream ever since I can remember. To help people and brighten their days, regardless of whether or not I'm super strong or cool. Do you think? Izuku started. All Might held up a hand. Is that what you truly want? Izuku nodded. Are you prepared for the hardships it may entail? Izuku nodded, and the hero laughed heartedly. Then of course you have a shot, young Midoriya. Why I myself was a late bloomer. Didn't manifest my quirk until just before I started at UA. It was hard, I don't deny that. Almost felt like giving up a couple of times, but I persevered and eventually, the rest is history. He then stood at attention, looked Izuku dead in the eyes and said, Young man, you too can become a hero. And thus, this day became the second happiest of Izuku's life. As tears stung his eyes, he tried in vain to hold his composure around his hero. Hisashi wasn't faring much better himself. A mix of gratitude towards All Might and shame in himself filling his form. Where had he been when his son needed those words? And you, sir? Hisashi was brought out of his thought by All Might. Sticking to aid your son in any way you can truly warms my heart. Forgive the oddness of this question, but tell me, what type of build would you say he has? I ask because I many have an action plan that could boost his chances into getting into UA. The father's eyes widened and showed the hero a picture of his son before the accident. Ah, here it is. Here, have him follow this regimen and his chances should skyrocket. Well, I must be off. Due at the office soon and all that. Remember Midoriya's Go Beyond, plus Ultra. And with a sonic boom that actually made some of the trash crumble, All Might vanished from their sight. For a full half hour, neither moved or said any rang. Elation and gratitude filling their minds. The one hero had given them aid. It was then they realized something that anybody would be ashamed of them for. We didn't ask him for an autograph. They hung their heads in shame before they saw 2 sheets of paper taped to Hisashi's car, with All Might's signature on them. He did it when we weren't looking. Father and son said together in shock and awe, abandoning their task to admire the treasures. This will become an heirloom passed down for generations, Izuku promised. Magi is going to be so jealous, Hisashi grinned, so giddy with delight that he missed a detail his son pointed out. Wait, Dad? Izuku asked. Isn't that the contract for Endeavor's company? His father checked. Inji's an old money prick anyways. Hisashi noted, tossing the rest of the contract aside so as to hold and cherish the autograph. And I can probably print another copy at the office. Besides, the deal wasn't all that important. We got an offer from the Yaorazu family yesterday. Now if All Might had signed that, it would have been a different story. That family is so rich they make Inji look like a beggar. But they're also incredibly charitable and forward. Honestly, the only reason they never appear in the Fortune 500 is because they limit their look. And anyways, they actually help pay for damages heroes, cause so All Might's not exactly their least or most favorite person. Though it would have been funny to see Inji's react. Dad, you're rambling, Izuku noted. Wait, you know Endeavor. Sorry. Hisashi chuckled. And yeah, we went to school together until he got into UA. Pretty sure I mentioned that at least once. Izuku wasn't listening, his eyes sparkling in admiration at what Hisashi had just said. My dad went to school with the #2 hero. He fanboyed to himself, getting a chuckle out of the older man before an alarm sounded. It was now 6:30. Time for them to head back to town, wash up, and hopefully get something to eat before heading to school and/or work. How about we call it a morning and meet up after school? His father suggested. Can't imagine there's too much to do at the office yet. Izuku nodded, still in fanboy mode. MHPM. Hisashi had been proven wrong. The firm had gotten a swarm of business the night before, so he and Magi would have to pull an all-night shift as they sorted out possible deals as well as prepared for their upcoming one with the Yaoruzo family. Because of this, Izuku was without a ride to the beach. But that did not deter our hero. He simply walked to the beach and continued where he had left off, his form now filled with vigor and determination to live up to All Might's words to him. Hey, Freckles. Izuku turned to see a beaming Mina waving over at him. Oh, and Mina, he said, dropping the unidentifiable piece of junk. What ya up to? Training my quirk. Izuku admitted, stretching his left arm and enlarged his hand to pick up a bundle of cans. Late bloomer and all. Cool. Care for some company. Before he could answer, Mina had hopped off the road and dropped her school bag, sitting down. Oh, don't stop on my behalf, Freckles. Freckles, huh? Izuku smiled weakly. What happened to Stretch? Too obvious and not cute enough. Izuku broke into a blush, making Mina giggle. She then spied an abandoned fridge and stood up, cracking her knuckles as a glob began to form into her hand. She then tossed the glob, which ate right through the fridge, making Izuku's eye widen. Aw geez, Mina sighed. Still too strong. Maybe you should try thinking of something calming, Izuku asked weakly. I mean, you don't have to. I just read that sometimes. Izuku. Mina cut him off, then smiled. That's a great idea. Thank you. Mina did such imaging okra as she formed the glob, and then unleashing it on the unfortunate fridge, which now was burned but still in one piece. Wow, it worked. Thanks, Izu, Mina beamed, giving her friend a hug, and missing him going so red a tomato would have sued him. Holy cow, a pretty girl just hugged me. A pretty girl just hugged me. Our hero thought to himself, before returning to his training. So aside from smashing junk, what you doing? Got any plans? Mina asked a few minutes later. Well, not really. Mom is visiting Aunt Mitsuki and Dad is working late. You? Mina shrugged. Mom and Gordon are visiting my grandparents and Naji has a date with his girlfriend. Plus, my dad and yours are working all night, so I got no plans. But I do have an idea if you're interested. Izuku listened. MHPM. Izuku was now wishing he hadn't listened to his very pretty friend. Did he think pretty? He meant peppy. Yeah, that's what he meant, peppy. I mean, she was pretty. And she had no objections to him calling her that. As he mentally rambled, he did not forget where and Mina were at. An arcade she frequented, about to play a dance game. With Izuku looking like he was about to melt into a puddle and slide into the cracks of the floor. Just relax and feel the moves come to you, Mina explained. Don't forget, it's just a game. BB, but Mina, I've never. The song, a Spanish tune, suddenly burst from the speakers and Mina was quick to begin dancing. And with her bright smile, Izuku couldn't but stare as she confidently and seamlessly moved to the beat and hit each of the arrows she was supposed to, not just with her feet, but with her hands and will adding spins into it. A crowd soon gathered to watch, cheering the pink-skinned girl on as the speed began to pick up. Without missing a beat, Mina hit each and every one of her targets before spying Izuku staring at her, gobsmacked. Don't fall too behind, Freckles, she teased as Izuku's side of the machine started. With an eep, Izuku tried to keep up with the arrows, missing and misstepping a few times as his legs got tangled. Just as he was about to fall, He used his hands to bounce up and untangle his legs, them catching up and finding himself enjoying this far more than he had anticipated. Finally, the last bit of the song came along, and the two teens found themselves mirroring each other's movements before reaching the final note, which Mina ended with a two-handed handstand, and Izuku unintentionally ended with his head hitting the arrow, getting a few giggles in the crowd. Mina ended up having the better score, but Izuku's wasn't as bad as he had been thinking it would. "And you've never played this before?" she asked as they went to grab a bite. "Not really, no," Izuku confessed. "For the longest time it was just Deku?" Izuku paused, his dreaded nickname filling his head. He turned to see the former flunkies of Bakugo working at the till, and not at all happy to see him. "Oh, hi guys," he weakly responded. "How's it?" Before he could fancy, Mina pulled him away and glared at the two who were glaring at her friend. "Mina, what?" "You were uncomfortable. I'm not eating anywhere where the staff does that to you." "And what do they mean by Deku?" Mina asked, looking at her friend in confusion and concern. "Well, it's an old joke from my old school." Izuku weakly chuckled, embarrassed Mina was learning about this. "An old friend gave me the nickname Cause in his mind. Because I was quirkless, I was worthless." His friend's normally cheerful and upbeat attitude vanished. Instead, a straight face and narrowed eyes were what appeared on Mina Ashido's face. "This guy sounds like a prick," she said bluntly. Elsewhere, Bakugo sneezed, waking his baby sister up from her nap. "Well, he was smart and popular, so it caught on," Izuku explained. "The teachers still called me Midoriya, but practically everyone else stuck to." The sound of sizzling filled Izuku's ears, and he glanced to see Mina was dripping some acid so powerful it melted the floor and let some steam rise into the air. She seemed to be holding her breath and anger in. Wait, everything turned out okay, mostly." Izuku tried to assure her before he remembered how he had cost his childhood friend his dream. "So what?" Mina asked. "That doesn't excuse what they did. And before you give me any macho or boyish crud about how I wouldn't understand, let me tell you, Boku, I probably do better than you give me credit." This got Izuku's attention. "You think I was always this cool? I was picked on for a long time too, you know," she confessed. Now it was time for Izuku's face to harden. How? It defied his mind. Mina was kind, athletic and fun going with an amazing quirk. To pick on her made no sense to him. Still, he held his tongue and listened. "Yeah, kids were pretty mean about my horns and eyes. And don't get me started on all the cracks about pink skin. That, and with an acid quirk. Playing could be a problem if I wasn't careful." Izuku's face softened, sympathy filling him, before Mina's normal smile returned. "But then it occurred to me. Real friends and family wouldn't care about how I looked, what I did, or how I went about doing it. And that was all that really mattered. What others think of me doesn't matter in the long run. I'll probably never even see half of them again unless I save them." The world went silent for a moment, and suddenly, it all clicked to Izuku Midoriya. "You're right." "Huh?" Mina asked in confusion. "You're right, Mina," Izuku repeated, a new feeling overtaking him. One that made him feel strong enough to fight All Might and figure out a slew of quirks just by looking at their user. "I shouldn't worry about what other people think. I should hold my head up high and plunge forward." Mina smiled, liking this more confident Izuku. Normal Izuku was adorable, she wouldn't deny that, but wait. Did she just call him adorable? The rumbling of stomachs got their attention. "Dinner?" Izuku suggested, pointing to a burger place near the arcade. "Why, Mr. Midoriya, are you asking me out?" Mina asked coyly. "Perhaps, Miss Ashido," Izuku replied. "Are you accepting?" Mina did accept, and the two had a great meal before another round of games. making careful sure to avoid the former bullies. Izuku then escorted Mina home, making sure she got to the front step before turning to head home. "See ya at Ua, Izu." Mina beamed as she waved goodbye. Izuku then decided to let loose and bounced his way home like a Parker athlete, occasionally shape fighting into a car or plane to cover more distance. Miraculously, no pros or cops noticed him, but someone else did. MHPM. In a luxurious building in downtown, an elderly doctor began to tremble. "I want an explanation." The boy was quirkless. "I thought nothing of it." "Please, master. You can't expect me to keep track of every single one-time patient of mine. And neither of us could have predicted someone would come A-course that old factory." "True. But still, your rather poor performance when he was reevaluated leaves me concerned, doctor." 1 week after Hisashi had returned home, the Midoriya family had revisited the doctor, who was forced to eat his words and admit he had made a mistake in labeling Izuku quirkless. It then came out his license had been suspended a while ago, and if not for his master's timely intervention, the man would be in jail or dead. The shadowy figure sipped on some wine that cost more than an entire city block before smiling evilly. "You have a grandson with a flying quirk, right?" One did not have to be a genius to figure out where the legendary villain was going with this. "Master, please." A sense of power flooded the room, sending the old man to his knees. "Tsubasa, do remember, you're not the only doctor I have on speed dial. While you have been instrumental in Namu production, you could easily be replaced. Quite frankly, if what Tamura tells me is true, you've been getting a little bit of an ego. Do as I say, and this shall be your only punishment." As the pressure keeping him to the ground left, the elderly man, gasping for air, simply said, "Yes, all for one." The aforementioned villain observed the footage of Izuku escaping the factory, and then some of him testing out his power. It was finally time. There he stood, right in front of the massive H-shaped building that was Ua, the greatest hero school in Japan, where his hero had graduated from. His dream high school. And if everything went well today, this is where he would call his second home for the next 3 years. Izuku stood at the front gate, a slew of emotions overtaking his being. Excitement, nervousness, accomplishment, and determination. But most especially accomplishment. Hisashi had been expecting for Izuku to clear at least a third, maybe half of the beach. But his son had proven to truly embody US mantra of plus ultra. The boy had cleared the beach that very morning, a sight his parents had buried into their memories. Their son standing triumphantly, a toothy grin on his face as the beach they had fallen in love on shined like a jewel. That morning there had not been a speck of garbage on the beach. If they could be any prouder of their son, the Midoriyas didn't know how to. After a great big breakfast, Hisashi had dropped Izuku off a block before Ua, wishing him luck. "I'll pick you up in a few hours," Hisashi promised, messing with his son's hair. "Knock him dead, sport." Izuku slaughtered his father as he drove off, then turned and finally realized where he was. The Ua. Apprehension and doubt filled our hero. Maybe this wasn't. Smack. He smacked himself back to reality. He had trained for 10 moths, had a great power and keen mind on his side. He could do this. Besides, Mina would never let him hear the end of it if he chickened out. Hell, he'd never let himself hear the end of it. That was the old him. "I'm no longer the useless Deku who can't do anything right," he told himself, not caring how it looked as he stepped forward. "I'm the Deku who gives it his all, and today I prove it." He then stepped in front of his other foot and began to fall towards the ground. Oh, the irony, he whispered in his head. The cruel, cold iron. Wait a second. I can deflect damage, so why is my face not meeting concrete and or stone? There you go. He felt 2 arms position him back upright, and then realized there was nothing holding him to the weight. Never mind, there was the ground. Sorry, I used my quirk on you. The speaker, a very cute girl with brown hair and adorable smile, said. I figured you didn't want to get hurt. Before Izuku could comment, he heard a familiar voice. There you are. Izuku and his savior turned to see Mina bounding her way over their way, smiling her usual beautiful smile. Yes, Izuku had thought that. Mina had a beautiful smile that made this already good day even brighter. Was hoping to see you here. Freckles, she smiled. Ready to kick ass and take names. Oh, who's this? My name is Ochako Uraraka. The girl smiled, reaching for a handshake Mina happily gave. Your friend almost tripped on his feet, and I was helping him, Mina Ashido. Thanks for helping Izu, he's kind of a klutz. Mina beamed at the new girl. Izuku did not deny or comment. Ochako turned to the boy she had helped. Izu? Realizing he was still standing in shock from talking to another pretty and nice girl, not really talking, Izuku cleared his throat and extended a hand to shake. Izuku Midoriya. Ochako shook his hand as the bell rang. Well, I better get going. Good luck in case I don't see you. Ochako beamed as she headed off to her exam room. I like her. Mina smiled as she and Izuku followed other students into the building. She was nice. Izuku followed, only to regret that when he saw the look on Mina's face. Why, Mr. Midoriya, are you growing tired of me already? Mina teased. What? No, of course not. Why would I? Hitane realized what she was doing. You're teasing me again, aren't you? Oh no, Mina assured him. No, I would never. Izuku look. All might and midnight. Where? Our hero snapped his head around like an owl's, only to not see the two heroes and hear Mina break into laughter. Sorry, she gasped in between laughs. Can't help it. You're so cute when you're flustered. Anyways, I gotta head to my section. But I'll be rooting for ya, Izu. She then raced off, leaving Izuku to find his way to his exam room for the written portion. With his fanboy knowledge, he got 90% easily. An hour later, Izuku found himself in a very crowded gym, where President Mike explained how the practical part of the test would work. For 10 minutes, students would face off against 5 different types of robots they were expected to destroy. Izuku quickly jotted down what Mike was saying, even doodling each robots, each worth a different amount of points, save for one. Excuse me. A tall and muscular boy with glasses suddenly stood up, getting Mike's attention. The form said there were 4 robots, yet you show us 5. Please explain. This would be a great insult to you otherwise, and you. The boy called out, pointing to Izuku. Me? The broccoli-haired boy asked. Yes, you. You've been doodling the entire time. If this is a game to you, leave. The old Izuku would have reacted rather poorly to being called out like that. The old Izuku would have embarrassed and apologized for something he didn't really do. This was not the old Izuku, however. And with a firm tone in his voice, yet a smirk on his face, he stretched his arm to show the boy his notes and said, It's called making notes. Helps retain information. To me, help do my best. What? You expect others to just listen and retain? Hadazuku mused. So this is how pointing out stupidity feels. I kind of like it. The bespectacled boy held his tongue, but a blush had covered his cheeks. A few laughed at the interaction, and Izuku himself settled in for the rest of the lecture. Apparently, the 5th robot was worth 0 points, and taking it on meant automatic failure. MHPM. On the bus to the testing grounds, Izuku looked in vain for Mina or Ochako. He instead found himself sharing a seat with the glasses with the stick-up-his-butt fellow and a boy with purple, gravity-defying hair. As he looked over, the glasses-wearing boy once again stuck his nose in Izuku's nose. Are you trying to distract others from concentrating? Strike 2. Izuku mused. I'm trying to find some friends of mine. Do you always assume the worst of everyone? He asked. The boy said nothing and instead moved to another seat. Prick. The purple-haired boy beside Izuku suddenly said. Izuku found himself agreeing with him. They sat in silence for a minute before Izuku asked, So, what do you have? Brainwashing. Hitoshi sighed, already prepared for this. Next the kid would. That's so cool. Sing his praises. Wait, what? Hitoshi was taken aback. Someone was complimenting his villainous ability. How? He asked. You could calm down riots, help rescue hostages by asking for them. Izuku rambled the whole way over, and unlike so many others, Hitoshi couldn't find himself hating the green-haired boy for it. His whole life, people had told him he'd probably become a villain with his quirk, and no one aside from his parents gave his dream of being a hero any thought. Now, a kid he had originally seen as stuck-up and spoiled was giving him ideas for to use his quirk that made sense and yet seemed so simple. In fact, said kid spent the remainder of the ride filling Hitoshi's head with ideas on how he could use brainwashing in heroic manners. Hey, what's your name? He asked before they were separated into different parts of the arena. Izuku Midoriya, Izuku called out. You? Histohi Shinsho. MHPM. After a quick review of the rules, President Mike issued that the practical had begun. Students dashed off in search of robots to destroy, almost leaving Izuku standing alone. With a smirk, he then bounded up and down, his legs becoming springs as he searched for targets. Spying a few flying robots heading his way, Izuku pulled back the tops of his index finger and thumb like a slingshot after slipping a pebble into them and let it fly, destroying 2 robots. Nice start, Izuku beamed before he saw some students on bulighting tops looking for targets. This gave him an idea. He landed on such a bulighting and then pulled his eye almost out of its socket, the eye enlarging enough for him to see half the area, and grossing many people out as well as making his eye feel dry and sore. Speaking of people, Izuku spied a larger robot racing after some students. He leapt downwards, shifting his form into a bulldozer and swinging with all his might. I came in like a wrecking ball, Izuku declared as he slammed a 2-pointer into 3 more of its kind, only to feel sick at his own joke. Oh, wow, that was awful. I am so sorry. Ignoring the glares, he went about his way, changing into a plan to get another view of everything. A more tank-like robot appeared and our hero dived downwards it, turning into a jackhammer to damage it, only for a blur to zip by and send the robot flying. It was the glasses-wearing boy yet again. Okay, calling Izuku out for a perceived slight was one thing. Assuming he was trying to sabotage someone else was another. But stealing his kill. After the 10 months of hellish training he'd put himself through, Izuku's limit had been reached. Okay, you know what? Izuku snapped. I'm getting sick of you. He then turned into a catapult, and next thing the boy knew, he was being sent flying, about 10 feet away, with a shrug and some satisfaction. Our hero then turned into a plane to get a better view of the area, only to see others doing the same. A blonde boy who seemed to have way too many quirks, a boy with pointy hair and what looked like a ninja. And then an idea came to our hero. Subtly and carefully, he slunk and slithered along Tay ground before coiling around the boys like a snake, tripping them into each other. Heroes don't steal, behave. Izuku beamed just as another bot attacked, this one with missiles, which sank into Izuku's form and then bounced right back, destroying them instantly and getting Izuku even more points which he realized he probably should be counting. But hey. Just then, the ground shook and all turned to see the 0-pointer. A Godzilla-sized mecha complete with arms, a tail and tank tire legs. And instantly, any confidence Izuku had been building up died. As many of the other students began to run, Izuku RC-cad his brain trying to think up a way out of this situation. Mike had said it was a target to be avoided, and to take it on meant you failed. But surely a hero. Oh. Izuku stopped in his thoughts when he realized somebody had not been as quick as the others. He slowly turned and saw something that made his heart freeze. Ochako's leg was pinned underneath some rubble, and she was trying to crawl free. Mina was at her side, trying to melt the debris to her new friend out. But she wouldn't be able to do so in time. Without a second thought, Izuku raced forward and did what may have just been the stupidest thing he'd done ever since he got this power. He morphed into an iron beam and stopped the robot's charge, trying to buy his friends time to escape. The Zero Pointer's computer picked up on this, and its arms began flaying around, destroying more buildings and causing more debris. MHPM. Hitoshi had been running along with everyone else at first. He knew he had no chance of taking on the Zero Pointer. His quirk only worked on living beings. That had all changed when he saw Izuku race back to help the two girls. Call it sensing a kindred spirit, or wanting to show how shallow some of these guys were. Or maybe, just maybe, call it believing in what Izuku had said. But Hitoshi then did something he had never done before. He willingly used his quirk to make a situation work for him. "Hey, jackasses," Shinsho shouted indiscriminately, sensing that for once his quirk was working alongside his wants. He saw the tall glasses-wearing boy, the apparent French boy in fancy-looking clothes, and what appeared to be the humanoid version of the Pokemon Tentacruel. He could use this. "All right, Speedy, get back there and make sure those girls get out and stay out of harm's way. Belly button, blast away everything that is heading towards the deserters. And body horror, you keep an eye and direct them as you need to." The trio did as he was ordered. The French student blasting away debris without a care for his tummy ache. The squid-like boy helping in aiming his laser, and the glasses-wearing boy helped Mina get Ochako out before racing back towards the crowd. "Wait," Mina called out, struggling out of the speedster's grasp. "We need to go back for Izuku." Hitoshi then saw just where his kindred spirit was, looking like he was about to be crushed by the Zero Pointer. Worry filled him, and he was just about to order the trio to repeat the task, hoping brainwash still worked in his favor, when he saw something that would change his life forever. Izuku, now seeing Mina and Ochako were out of harm's way, shifted back into his normal self before taking on a snake-like form and slithering away from the giant foot. He then morphed himself into a bouncing slinky and made his way up the Zero Pointer's head, leaping between its palms and occasionally shifting his form into a biplane to cover more distance. When he saw it, a switch. "This looks important," our hero hollered, and with all of his might, he flipped that switch. The robot stopped suddenly, its lights going out and its body falling forward. "Oops," Izuku gasped, realizing he hadn't thought about making sure the Zero Pointer stayed where it shut off while it was in motion. Izuku then jumped back down, then using his own body as a makeshift slingshot, using elasticity to fling the Zero Pointer into the other direction, over the school grounds. And unfortunately for him, as he would later learn, right back on the beach he had just cleaned. He then gasped for air and looked over at the slack-jawed crowd. Is everybody okay?" he asked, just as the bell rang. "Time's up," President Mike announced. MHPM. After making sure everyone was okay, Izuku had been surprised when Mina had raced over to him and hugged him with all her might. "Don't you ever do something that crazy again," she had demanded. "You could have been killed. Be but a hero." Izuku had started, only to be cut off again. "I know that a hero has to sacrifice to save people. I know that." She then calmed herself down. I'm sorry. I know this is your dream. But Izu, you don't have to sacrifice right away. At least not here. I mean, we want you to keep going home to your folks, and I want to keep hanging out with you." This was not like the Mina Izuku knew. She was saying these things as they came to her. He then saw her eyes, now almost brimming with tears at the thought of him being gone. Izuku once again found himself disliking not seeing Mina with a smile on her face. "I'm sorry, Mina," he apologized. "It won't happen again. Can I make it up to you?" Mina's happy smile returned, then turned into her sneaky one. "You can start by taking me to the Aliens Marathon on Saturday and Sunday." Izuku's mind flashed back to the scenes from the first Alien movie he had ingrained into his mind when he and his family had visited the Ishidos. He whimpered. "And after that, help me babysit Gordon." "That seems fair," Izuku mused. Unknown to the two of them, Hitoshi and Ochako watched them with knowing smiles. MHPM. A week later, Izuku stared at the fish that was part of his dinner, reliving the events of the selection exam over and over again in his mind. "Izuku, snap out of it." Inko tried calling out in unease. "Why are you staring at that fish?" "Buddy, are you okay?" Hayashi asked, equally disturbed by the look on his son's face. Said son said nothing. With a sigh, Hisashi took a deep breath. "Hisashi Midoriya, I told you no fire breath at the dinner table," Inko called, only to see her husband's cheeks were puffed and his face was turning colors. "Don't you dare." Hisashi let out a stream that burnt the fish in his son's chopsticks, to Asham finally bringing the youngest Midoriya back to reality, just as his mother smacked his father upside the head. "Sorry guys," Izuku apologized as he ate his meal ravenously. The family then returned to eating their dinner, the son tuning out most of his father's talk about work, as he grew antsy about whether or not he had made it in. 10 minutes after dinner. Holy flaming crap on a crap sandwich. "Hisashi," Inko snapped before seeing what had made him swear. "TTT the test results." Izuku stopped his regular after-dinner workout. "Buddy, they're here," Hayashi shouted. "Izuku, they're here. They're here." The boy dropped the dumbbell and stretched his arm to grab the letter before doing the same to get the door to his room, which he flung himself into. For a good minute, he left the envelope as it was, before tearing it open to deciding to live with the consequences of whatever came along. The letter turned out to be holographic, as a very familiar voice beamed. "I am here, as a projection." There was All Might in a yellow business suit, smiling brightly. "Been a while, hasn't it, young Midoriya? In case you're wondering, I'm actually going to be teaching at UA. And speaking of which, you did a phenomenal job on the written part of the test, with 90%. As for the practical, you made a little above the minimum for that. We had to dock some points for your handling of some of the less than cooperative examinees. But I am pleased to say you made the cut. Until you took on the 0-pointer. Izuku hung his head. However, battle strength alone is not the only thing we keep an eye out for. We have rescue points. And you amassed quite a few, not only by saving young Miss Ashido and Uraraka, but the aforementioned dealing of some less cooperative examines. Boo, what most drew the judge's attention, however, All Might announced, was your ability to inspire teamwork between fellow heroes. The video then flashed to show Hitoshi directing the others to help Izuku. A sense of gratitude filled our hero. That being said, All Might suddenly said, his face now going from a beaming smile to a toothless one, almost a frown. There was the matter of the incident. The letter then flashed to Izuku stumbling out of the chemical factory he had trespassed on the day his ability had come to him. Ordinarily, any criminal record, no matter how little, would result in your immediate dismissal. All Might said sadly, and Izuku's heart began to shatter. All that hard work, being so close to his dream he could taste it, and, however, All Might's smile returned. The principal of UA, Nezu, has final say on the matters, and had this to say. The image then changed once again. This time on appeared a bear, a mouse, some kind of mammal in a suit. "Hello, young Izuku. You probably already know who I am, so I'll keep this brief. Do forgive the messy state of my office. Let us just say that Power Loader is not a fan of you right now. Izuku could swear he heard someone ranting about pummeling the hell out of him when he came to get his costume done. Your case is an interesting one. You are quirkless, yet an accident gave you an ability quite like a dare I say it combination of quirks. This was actually rather common back in the first generation, but more to the point of you ordinarily. As All Might, and I'm certain you would know, we would not make any exceptions. But you have proven to have the mindset of some of the vigilantes of the first generation truly wanting to help others. I will not see potential like that wasted. So, All Might then appeared next to each Nezu and sat alongside him. Welcome, Izuku Midoriya to Yua. Inko and Hisashi had been pacing back and forth, Hayashi chewing on his nails, and Inko worriedly praying to every deity she could think of, when their son's door opened. He simply smiled, which told his parents everything. Oh, my baby, Inko bawled in happiness, taking her son into arms. That's my boy, Hisashi beamed, messing with his son's hair. MHPM. Hitoshi Shinsho's letter was not what he expected. Eraserhead was the one who delivered his message. This immediately set Hitoshi on the edge. From what he gathered, All Might had been doing most of the acceptance letters. I'll be blunt, you did good on the written test, but didn't get enough points in the practical. Now, your quirk isn't suited for the combat-heavy test, we realized. But when you showed negotiation and teamwork skills to help that problem child, Hitoshi couldn't but smirk at that. That summed up Izuku pretty well, he figured. The letter then showed him directing some of the runners to go back and help the injured girl and clear debris where he had seen students being in harm's way. A little blunt and rude, some argued, but a hero can't always coddle and comfort. That little stunt there earned you something called rescue points. 24 of them, to be exact. Hitoshi quickly did the math. He had met the bare minimum to get in. He then pushed that hope. Along with this message, there is a training regimen for you to follow to a T. Yua doesn't usually do this, so take this regimen and train hard, Hitoshi. Aizawa told him. The second a spot opens up in the hero course, you're in it. With any luck, I'll fail someone on the first day. Someone's hand came in. I don't care if it's unprofessional, it's true. The hand made a motion to. I've failed entire classes last year. I'll do it again if I need to. Defeated. The hand made a hurry-up motion. Fine. Anyways, welcome to Yua, Hitoshi Shinsho. Hitoshi broke down into his room, tears of happiness escaping his eyes. From outside his room, his parents had similar reactions. Happy that fortunes were changing for their son, and that he now had a chance to become the hero he wanted to be. They also made a point to try and find this stretching boy who had helped him out. Before everyone knew it, it was Monday morning and time for school. And not just any school, no. It was the beginning of high school. The best or worst years of your life, depending on how you look at it. For our hero, things were even more daunting. He was going to the most prestigious and acclaimed hero school in all of Japan, Yua itself, where his hero All Might and countless others had graduated from. So here he was, almost out the door, and enduring his parents, worriedly making sure he hadn't forgotten everything. You have all your books? Inko asked. Money for lunch and the train? Hisashi added. Did that last night? Remember, Izuku said, a little tired of this. He appreciated it, but did you bring a change of underwear? Inko asked. Okay, now it was getting a little annoying. Honey, no one asks that, Hisashi said to his wife. Thank you, Dad, Izuku beamed. Well, did you at least remember your hanky? Inko asked. Okay, this was ridiculous. Yes, now can I go? I'm going to miss the train for my first day, Izuku pointed out, reaching for the doorknob. Izuku, wait. Okay, this was the last time. What? Instantly, all irritation vanished when he saw his parents. Inko looking down at her feet and Hisashi scratching the back of his head. Now Izuku was feeling like a jerk. until he saw that they were smiling. "We're really proud of you, buddy." Hisashi smiled. "You've become so cool." Inko followed, then reaching behind her and pulling out a costume she had made for him. A hoodie with goggles and form-fitting sweats with the symbols for hero and plastic on it. Filled with warmth and with tears stinging his eyes, Izuku hugged his parents goodbye before racing off, shoving the costume into his bag when he reached the station and saw that. Luckily, he ended up being early. "You know," Hisashi mused to his wife once their son was out of view, and she began to clean up the breakfast dishes. "I've been thinking lately." "About what?" Inko said as she turned, only to see her husband looming over her with a rougeish and dare she say, alluring smile. "With Mitsuki and Masaru having one for Katsuki, don't you think Izuku could use a little sister?" Inko blushed at her husband's suggestion. She had been thinking about it, in all honesty. Now that Magi was home with a partnership job, the couple had had more time to be together. But still, being the rational and somewhat worrywart that she was, she asked, "Hisashi, don't you have that meeting with the Detnerat company this morning? And how do you know it would be a girl?" "Magi called and told me he's handling it. And because there are enough boys in this world, we need another Inko. And finally, this is the first time we've had the apartment to ourselves for a while." Inko smiled and took her husband's face into her hands while he took her into his arms. "And okay, moving on from that." Meanwhile, Izuku rode the train to his school, excitement filling his form. His whole life he had been dreaming of this moment, and now it was coming to pass. He decided to pinch himself just to make sure it wasn't a dream. Ouch. Nope. Still reality after all. Okay then. Glancing around the train, Izuku saw a newspaper article that caught his eye. "Nice creeper strikes again. Vigilante incriminates Uwabami. Ties to stain disproved. The nice creeper." Izuku mentioned his mother had met the fellow once 10 years ago, when she got lost on her way to a job interview. She had seen a very kind-hearted and helpful young man in an All Might hoodie limited edition, no less. Not even Izuku had one those, who did things like picking up litter and getting kites out of trees. He seemed to have a quirk that enabled him to glide on any surface from what Inko had mentioned. But then a week later, he had been reported to have changed. His mental health took a downturn, and after the exposure of corruption at a university that he had apparently had a role to play in, and the preventing of an attempted rape, the nice creeper had adopted a new look and more violent way of handling crime. His skin became golden. He adopted a boa into his costume, and his All Might hoodie was unzipped, now revealing a body that had become progressively more toned over the years. At the moment, there was a warrant for his arrest just for questioning. Yet many of the civilians he had ended up helping often claimed he was, while brutal in combat, far too nice to be that bad. Considering he was believed to be responsible in stopping a trigger drug ring, an out-of-control bus, and several other deeds, it wasn't too hard to see why. Izuku wondered if he'd ever get the chance to meet the fellow, before remembering the monumental events that were happening today. High school. At UA. Soon, he would be on the track to becoming a hero. His dream was now so attainable, he could almost taste it. Izuku's mouth began to water slightly. While he'd had a full breakfast that morning, he suddenly found himself craving the curry that Mina had brought to his attention the previous day. Sunday morning, after the Alien series weekend marathon. "Wow, that was great. So much better on a big screen. What was your favorite part, Izu?" Mina beamed as they stepped out of the theater. The end credits. A shivering Izuku answered bluntly, images from the movies filling his mind. You'd think seeing the first chest burst the night their families had dinner together would have helped. But it actually made things worse. Izuku was not blessed with a S-raw match of steel. Mina, picking up on this, let out a small, sad smile. "Well, maybe now you'll think twice before leaping in to save a pretty girl from something out of your league." Izuku stopped shivering in fear at the images and smirked back at Mina. Can't promise that with us becoming heroes and all, but I'll definitely try. Just then, their stomachs growled. Breakfast? Izuku suggested. Not exactly breakfast, but I know a little place that makes the single greatest curry around. Mina pointed across the street to a cafe that seemed popular yet not too popular. Leblang's. Present day. That little outing may have been a mixed bag. Izuku was traumatized by the Alien movies, although he had admit they had great atmosphere and cinematography, unforgettable scenes, and in retrospect, he loved the quirkless yet incredibly badass heroine. But that curry. Oh Lord, that curry had nearly destroyed his love for his mother's. Which is why he treated going there like a guilty pleasure he would later go to church and confess as a sin, quite unlike the time he was spending with Mina. Bing. Speak of the alien queen. Izuku flipped open his phone to see that Mina had shot him a text. Still okay with helping me with Gordy today. If you and your folks have plans, we can push it back to the weekend. Izuku quickly responded. Nah, I'm good. See you in class. See you in class, stretch. I liked Freckles better, Izuku mused. A few minutes later, Izuku found himself in his homeroom, which he found without much difficulty. He made a mental note to thank his father for somehow getting a detailed map of Ua when he had the chance. Opening the door, Izuku found he was one of the last students to arrive. He could see 3 other uninhabited seats. Hey, it's the stretching kid. You were so cool. Not being used to being praised, but enjoying it very much, Izuku found himself smiling and trying to remember everyone's names. But one in particular seemed determined to be remembered. I am Tenya Ida, the Bespel student who had nearly humiliated Izuku twice and was tossed away in a tajust as he chopped his arm. My apologies for how I treated you earlier. For you to figure out the hidden purpose of the tests only proves you truly are worthy of becoming a hero. Hidden purpose? Izuku asked, honestly confused. I just did the right thing. Unknowingly, the formerly quirkless boy's words had filled Ida with even more shame in himself, as evidenced when he hung his head in shame. Hey, wait a sec, Izuku begged, trying to cheer up his classmate. It was just a test. I'm sure no one would hold it against you. Besides, this is a school for heroes, right? Nobody got everything right overnight, not even All Might. Elsewhere in the city, the #1 hero sneezed as he Missouri Smash chopped a villain away. The sneeze sent the villain flying in a way not unlike a certain duo of sometimes bumbling thieves and their talking cat. At the same time, a very small yet very powerful old man felt dignified for some reason. Hey, Izu. Pulled out of his thoughts by the shout of a voice he was growing quite fond of, Izuku leapt into the air and held onto the roof for dear life. Mina, don't be mean. You know how nervous Izuku gets. A sweet voice cooed, making Izuku glance down. Good morning, Izuku. Our hero couldn't help but blush at the sight of Mina in a school uniform, alongside with Uraraka and a new face. A red-headed boy with a muscular beard, sharp teeth, and a scar above one of his brows. Suddenly, he felt very self-conscious. Wait. He could give himself a frame like that with a though. And with that train of thought, he accidentally let go and landed on the floor with a scream and splat. Izu. Mina worriedly rushed to her friend, now a puddle. From said puddle arose a single wobbling hand. GG, gimme a sec. The hand reached down and pulled upwards. Izuku was now visible, as flat as paper. He then stuffed his 2 index fingers into his mouth and blew, briefly becoming a balloon before returning to normal. Okay, I'm good now, he declared. Morning, Mina. Morning, Uraraka. Morning, person I've never met before, and I am now realizing how rude that sounds. Please don't pummel me within an inch of my life. Oh, Izu, this is my old classmate Kirishima, Mina said, pointing to the newcomer. So, you're the famous Izuku that Mina keeps going on about. The red-haired boy smiled. I hope she didn't say anything too bad, Izuku said shyly. No worries, it's cool. Kirishima smiled. Sides, anyone who can handle that monster tot is her baby bro, if a hell of a manly guy. Izuku wasn't sure how to take that, so they shook hands. If you're here to make friends, pack up and get out. All turned to see the source of the voice. Is that a caterpillar with an unshaven human face? A boy who looked like a human ninja octopus asked. A hand holding a juice box came right under said face, which emptied the drink. It took you 5 seconds to realize I was here. In the field, you'd have been killed 10 times over. Not a good sign, even for beginners. Get dressed for gym, and then meet me outside. MHPM. A few minutes later, the kids found themselves outside with other first years, one of which Izuku recognized. Hitoshi, Izuku cheered, waving over to the brainwash user. Hey Izuku. Hitoshi gave him a tired smile. Good to see you again, thanks. Hey, I should be thanking you for helping save Mina and Uraraka. Izuku pointed out. Yeah, this dork didn't have a plan beyond stopping the bot. Mina smiled, giving her and Uraraka's fellow savior a look over. He seemed tired, but if Izuku liked him, he had to be cool, right? The unshaven man from before gained everyone's attention. Welcome to UA. Usually, Class 1B onwards would be at the assembly by now. Blood King explained. However, due to certain concerns that have arisen in how the middle schools handle students in the wake of certain events, Izuku knew they were talking about what had happened to him, but were grateful they kept it to a minimum. We have decided to give you all a quirk assessment test to make sure you truly do deserve to be at UA. We have modeled the test after various gym exercises. Do your best or else. The 18-only heroine Midnight said with a smile. First off, a ball throw. Most did respectable with a couple 100 feet. Uraraka getting the top score of Infinity. That's my BFFF, Mina beamed. Hey, you. Hitoshi said to Tetsu. Throw my ball as hard as you can. Objection, Ida and a girl with vines shouted together. To force someone else to. Overruled, Aizawa said. He's using his quirk to his advantage. Tetsu threw the ball like his own, then wondered what had happened. No one told him. Suddenly, it was Izuku's turn. The whole time, Izuku had been racking his brain in how to handle this. Simply enlarging his fist and tossing wouldn't do enough to be impressive. And his control on strengthening his muscles was, well, the less sad the better. Rip Table-chan and Floor-kun, rip. Then an idea came to him. Izuku's form turned into one of a rocket ship, and he flew upwards before letting Tay-ball sail through the air. It burnt up upon Renetri, but effectively sailing around the city before landing into the nearby lake. All jaws dropped as Izuku returned to normal. Next, he said, not wanting to be the center of attention, which sadly, he kept becoming. He turned into a rocket to reach the end of the raceway in the second shortest time. For the distance test, he morphed his legs into those of a flea and landed with another splat when he accidentally hit a zeppelin. Who even uses these anymore? He shouted as he fell. A passing All Might had tried to save him, but missed by a milometer. Luckily, aside from a mounting fear of heights and some dizziness, Izuku was unharmed and none the worse. Until he crushed the grip test to pulp. Sorry. For the sidestep, he admittedly struggled and got the same score he got in middle school. He got to the middle of the scoreboard overall, which his classmates were elated and congratulated him for. The following students did not make the cut: Minoru Mainta, Yuga Aoyama, and Shihei Kiwaro. Now, you boys either hit the road, go to another school. There are buses waiting with your papers filled out, or join Class 1D. Your choice. Aizawa bluntly stated. Wait, you were serious? A maturely built young woman named Momo Yaorazu asked, shock filling her form. I thought it was a white lie to make us go all out. A good thought, and I'm glad it came from someone who did so well, Aizawa said. But there is a reason UA alumni go on to become the best. Now, if you wish, you can transfer to Class 1D, otherwise. He would have said he was sorry, but he wasn't. There are those with even more potential. A quirk is only as good as its wielder. And while UA will teach you to master them even more, there are some that just do not make the cake, Aizawa said. Hitoshi Shincho, consider yourself bumped to Class 1B. The brainwashing boy's eyes watered, and a genuine smile overtook his face. The same couldn't be said for the others, but they left without saying anything. You're all welcome to go home now or after lunch, but be at 8 sharp tomorrow morning. We'll be starting right away. Meantime, I'll be napping. As the crowds dispersed, Hitoshi found himself torn between two potential places to sit. He could either catch up with Izuku or grab lunch with his new classmates. Spying Izuku being dragged off by the pink-skinned girl, who was in a rush, he decided on the latter. Welcome aboard. Itsuka Kendo and Testu warmly greeted. Shincho nervously waved back before spying a girl waving at him as he tuned out Monama's declaration of war on Class 1A. A young girl with shoulder-length, bob-shaped hair, side swept to her right with some shorter strands hanging above her eyes. Her form was athletic, her skin fair, and her eyes cerulean. She was pretty darn cute, he had to muse. Yui Kodai, she said. Hitoshi Shincho. Kendo saw this and smiled, as did Uraraka. Mina and Izuku had to run to pick up Gordon from daycare. But the pink-skinned social butterfly had already promised that the whole class would meet up at LeBlanc on Friday for a week in review and socializing. That poor, stretching bastard. Kirishima teared. Dude, what's wrong, Sato? The boy with tape dispensing elbows asked. Mina's little brother is a monster. Ribbit. Nah, I think Midoriya is the real monster. Tsuyu, the frog-like girl noted. In terms of power, he seems to be overflowing in imagination and pretty strong. That's true, the invisible Toru noted. What the heck is his quirk, anyways? Shoji asked. MHPM. Upon awakening from his nap, Aizawa had left to seek out his boss, the super-intelligent Merce Bear Principal Nezu. He had a concern. His quirk, which enabled him to erase the quirks of those he looked at so long as he didn't blink, didn't work on Izuku at all. At each test, he had focused his quirk on the boy who had become a brief celebrity after the scandal taught Agv his power. While he had to admit that the boy was clever and versatile with his power, the fact his power couldn't be erased scared him. But of course it wouldn't work. It's a mutation, not a quirk. He turned to see Principal Nezu, finishing off a cup of tea. I just got off the phone with the plant. It would appear that the chemical compound young Midoriya fell into polymerized each and every cell in the young boy's body, elasticizing them to unbreakable levels. That would explain the strength and durability boost. Ah, so he's like silly putty. All Might beamed, only to flinch when his college and boss looked at him with confused looks. What? I played with it as a kid. Didn't you? You're an idiot. Aizawa frowned. But what about the shape-shifting? Last I checked, no one in his family had that. I have a hypothesis for that. Nezu explained, handing the two each a copy of a report. Skimming over the boy's various hero journals, he truly should invest in a better locker or combination. I noticed he possesses a keen analytical mind and excellent visualization and memory. I believe that whatever mixture the lad fell into also affected his brain's limbic and visual cortex, in a way fusing them together. This way, the boy is able to alter his appearance by stretching the very details of his cell's pigmentation and structure. All Might and Aizawa barely understood everything in that dialogue. Of course, it would have been easier to get a more accurate hypothesis if we knew the chemical in question. How a company managed to stay afloat without proper hazard management information in this day and age is beyond me. Still, I find it hard to believe the kid managed to ignore the pain his body had to go through. Aizawa started, speaking from personal experience. The principal cut in, his smile vanishing as his scar began to ache slightly. It is amazing what one can tune out when they're desperate to get out of a troublesome spot. Neither teacher would touch that. Now then, I do believe it is time for us to pack it in for the day. Toshinori, didn't you have plans with young Tagata before your date with Narumi? The #1 hero tensed, with a blush on his face, and dashed out the door to meet with his successor. Aizawa looked at his boss with an unsure look. And didn't you have plans to look after young Shinsho? The mouse bear asked. There's no need to hide your interest and care in a student, especially when you seem to have taken to him like Toshinori has Mirio. Not exactly professional, though. A teacher shouldn't play favorites. Eraserhead then left to shadow the boy who he had gotten into UA. MHPM. Izu. Mina's baby brother beamed happily at the sight of the broccoli-haired boy, running towards him as fast as his stubby little toddler legs could carry him. Evidently, this was not more than a few steps before he fell on his belly with an oof. Not deterred, Gordon Ishido crawled the rest of the way to the two older youths, reaching to Izuku. Hi there, Gordon. Izuku smiled before the boy clenched his little fist onto his nose and pulled until Izuku had a trunk. Should have seen that coming. The giggling toddler at Izuku's now nasally and high-pitched voice, as did several other children. Those giggles turned to laughter when the surprisingly strong baby's grip made Izuku's head go up and down several times, him shouting in protests that went unheard. Realizing this within a few minutes, Izuku decided to play along and stretched out his cheeks while making his hands big, making silly faces that the kids and staff adored. Awawa. Mina playfully moaned after a few minutes of giggling. What about me, Gordy? Is big sister too boring? Mina ni, Gordon smiled, letting go of Izuku's nose and reaching for his sister. As a giggling Mina laughed and took Gordon into her arms, Izuku crunched his elongated nose back to its normal size and place. He's obviously eating well, Izuku said to himself, giving his nose a few wiggles to make sure it was back in place. I think I'm starting to see what Kirishima was saying about the little guy. Oh please, you love this little guy. Mina smiled as she took Gordon's bag and handed it to Izuku while she held her brother. With that, they thanked the daycare staff, let Gordon wave goodbye, and then headed over to the Ishido home. If only life were that simple. What the Deku? A familiar voice filled the air, and in spite of himself, Izuku froze mid-step. Oh no. No. No, no, no. Not here. Not now. With a gulp, Izuku slowly turned around to see. KKK Kachin, the broccoli-haired boy asked, hoping this was a dream. Izuku pinched himself. Oh. Nope. Not a dream. The shock on the other boy's face turned into a frown. The heck you doing here? Bakugo snapped. Heck? Izuku asked, surprised by the boy's toned-down vocabulary. The old hag's been on my case ever since Day was born. Bakugo explained. Something about wanting one kid without a potty mouth or some poop. Izuku held back a chuckle. Day Bakugo, not even a year old yet, was a cheerful little girl who seemed to like her brother very much, if Tay reaching for him was any indication. She had looked over at this Deku with some interest, but unlike her big brother, saw no reason to hate him. He was funny with his stretchy nose. So, the heck you doing here, Deku? Izuku may have been able to ignore the grunts at the arcade or the teachers and students in his old school, but Bakugo was a different story. On top of being the primary bully of his life, There was still a part of Izuku that clung onto the happy memories of their childhood, and another part of him that felt immense guilt for getting him blacklisted from hero academies. Mina, however, evidently did not share these thoughts. Nor did she like Bakugo at all. Shifting Gordon so that he could only see what was behind her, she then marched over to confront him in a quick, and surprisingly for her at least, in her mind mature manner. It didn't take the pink-skinned girl too much to figure that this guy had to have been the prick that had given Izuku his nickname, and had probably been the leader of the two at the arcade. And as tempting as it was to verbally rip him a new one, her baby brother was here, and she could tell her friend just wanted to get out of this situation. Izuku is helping me out with Gordy today, Mina explained with a glare, emphasizing her friend's real name. Bakugo didn't seem to care or notice this. All he saw was that an admittedly good-looking girl, albeit one with weird eyes, was standing up for the loser that had cost him his dream. The heck is this Deku? Izuku, Mina corrected. Your girlfriend. The other two teens tensed and blushed. Izuku tried to form a sentence, but all that came out was mumbles. Mina was rendered speechless, which seemed to elicit a mix of concern and laughs from her baby brother. Un. Bakugo noticed that his sister was getting fussy and wanted to go home. With a lighter than usual scowl, he picked her up. We'll settle this another day, Deku and Raccoon Eyes. But right now, I got more important poop to do. Mina. Bakugo looked back. What was that, Deku? Her name is Mina, Izuku said, a glare on his face. And she's in UA too. Speaking of which, how was your first day of high school, Katsuki? Wow, Izuku thought. That felt really good. Like, even better than that time I won the complete limited edition and out of print All Might radio drama on CD. And he's still a fanboy, after all. Bakugo looked taken aback by Izuku calling him by his real name, but simply ignored it. Mina, on the other hand, had gone from indignant at Bakugo's nickname for her to elated and touched that Izuku had stood up for himself, albeit for her sake. Come on, Day. We're ditching this place. See ya later, extras, Bakugo growled as he stormed out, baby sister in his arms. Bye-bye, Gordon happily waved to the explosive blonde, hurting his pride even more. Day babbled a bye-bye back. A few minutes later, the two teens who had let out a big breath once that was over made it to the Ishido house, the baby's stomach rumbling and tears beginning to sting his eyes. Just a sec, Gordy. Mina assuredly cooed her baby brother as she dropped her bag and raced to the cabinets in search of his food. Izuku gently placed Gordon into his chair and began making funny faces to distract or calm him down, but to no avail. He then offered the baby his finger, which seemed to calm Gordon down enough to grab the finger and tie it into a knot, before sucking on it happily. Gordy, Mina, baby food in her hand, worriedly said when she saw the state of Izuku's finger. Before seeing Izuku himself was just happy that Gordon was happy. With a small chuckle, she said, You're way too nice, Izuku. Izuku shrugged. Hero's duty, after all. Spying his food, Gordon released Izuku's finger and opened his mouth for his sister to feed him. Izuku made his way to the sink to wash his finger, then willed it back into its normal state. He then turned and found himself being enraptured by Mina happily feeding her baby brother, even making some light acid shows to entertain him with, but being carefully to make sure it was never too close to him. What do you say? Mina asked her brother once he was full, and she finished wiping his mouth clean. Agato, Izumina, Gordon beamed as the two teens fed him, making them stop for a second. Did he? Yep. The two teens then awed at the toddler's adoration of them and lightly hemmed before Mina put on one of his videos. Hey Izu, if you're hungry I could pop in a pizza, Mina suggested, just as their own stomachs growled. Before long, Maji and Nia returned home to find Izuku and Mina finishing up the pizza and Gordon playing with his teddy animals. Magi, grateful and delighted at the sight, offered to give Izuku a ride back home, partly so that he could give Hisashi a quick rundown on how the meeting had gone. Usually, the boy would have politely declined out of not wanting to cause inconvenience. But today he took the offer, being spent from not only his first day of high school, but also confronting his biggest bully. Gathering his things, he waved goodbye to Mina and Gordon. Say bye-bye, Izuku, sweetheart. Mia cooed her son. Bye, Izu, Gordon waved. Bye, Gordon, Izuku beamed. See you in class, Mina. Be safe, Strength. Izuku hung his head. Why couldn't she stick with Freckles? Magi, picking up on this, laughed and lightly dragged Izuku to his car, dropping him off home a few minutes later. The second he was gone, Nia began to hound her daughter for details. Izuku had some of the katsudon his mother made for dinner that night, the rest being put into bentos for later in the week. Told his parents what had happened and went to bed tired, but happy. All in all, it was a great first day of school. It was the moment the students had all been waiting for. The reason all of them wanted to go to UA aside from the distance to home and its fame. The best part of hero training. Hero Training 101. Izuku had barely been able to sleep last night in anticipation for this class. Why? Oh, no big reason. Just the fact that the man who he and his classmates worshipped taught it. It seemed like he wasn't alone in this regard. The red and white-haired boy also had circles under his eyes, and many of the students were breathing deeply in anticipation, or fixing up their attires. I am here. All the students sat on the edge of their seats, impatiently and eagerly awaiting. Coming through the door like a normal person. There he was, in his Silver Age costume. All Might himself. The person who had told Izuku he could become a hero, and who had helped our hero and his father find the plan that had gotten him this far. All right, newbies, let's jump right into it. Today you begin one of the most fundamental aspects of hero work, combat training. Go pick up your costumes from your lockers and meet me at Training Block A. Yes, that is indeed where some of you took your acceptance test. Now go on, get MHPM. Not even 10 minutes later, most of Class 1 stood at the ready expect for one. Is Izuku okay? Ochako asked. He was the first to get his costume. Ida pointed out. One would think that. Right here, sorry about that. Was just checking something. An elongated leg, then stretched from the doorway, followed soon by another, and then the rest of our hero. Izuku had not had it in him to part with the costume his parents had given him on his first day. Their support and encouragement meant the world to him. Especially in Ko's, since she had been around the most in Izuku's life until recently. So when it had come time for the support course students to create his costume, he had merely dropped off the costume, offered some suggestions to be added, and had faith in their work. He was not disappointed in the least. In contrast to the many colorful, armored or skin-tight suits of his classmates, Izuku's costume was far simpler. It consisted of a dark red hoodie with similarly colored pants and black wraparound goggles. The one change from the support staff, aside from the goggles modifications, was a yellow belt that seemed to resemble two opposing triangles. Simple works best sometimes. All Might assured everyone before explaining the rules of training. He would pair students up and set them against each other. One team acing as villains with a missile, and the others as heroes out to stop them. The teams would be graded on how they acted during these battles, not only in terms of combative prowess, but also strategy and planning. The first match was Izuku and Mina against Ochako and Ida, with the latter acting as villains and the former as the heroes. The speedster and gravity controller were given 10 minutes to prepare before Izuku and Mina came in. Mina, now wearing a domino mask and purple leopard skin one-piece with boots and a feathered boa, used her acid to surf over the ground and even onto the walls. Izuku couldn't help but stare and admire her control over her quirk. Never would have thought of using acid like that. He mused, being half tempted to turn his feet into roller skates and follow in suit, before recalling how he was still not very coordinated. "So, you got any plans, Stretch?" Mina asked once they came to a stop. "All I really got is rushing them, and with Ida's speed that doesn't seem wise." Izuku began to think, trying to use what he had observed about the other two students, while also enlarging one of his ears to try and listen to any plan they might have been making. Finding nothing, he turned his head up and pushed a button on his goggles. "Izuku?" Mina asked. "Something wrong?" "No, my goggles have tracking of all kinds," Izuku explained as he spied a heat signature heading towards them. "Looks like Ida's coming this way. Wait." "No," defiantly Ida. "He can only go fast in a straight line, and then has to stop if he wants to change directions. Really needs to work around that." Mina giggled at Izuku's overly analytical notes, partially to calm her own nerves. "So he's leaving Ochako to guard the bomb," she mused. "I'm guessing we'll have to split up to finish this quickly." Mina was by no means battle-hungry, and didn't think herself as too vindictive, but she did know when and where to prioritize when it came to saving the day. She liked to think babysitting Gordon had helped in this regard, and while she didn't want to fight Ochako, she knew that she didn't stand much of a chance against Ida. "You go around the back and go after Ochako. She's on the top floor," Izuku reasoned. "I'll handle Ida." Izuku smiled evilly, which freaked out everyone who saw it. "F Freckles?" Mina asked. "Yeah? Never do that again," Mina begged, punctuating her words by poking her finger into his chest at each one. "What? Smile?" Izuku asked. "Well, at least not like that," Mina said offhandedly. She then realized her finger was sinking into Izuku. She pulled it out and his chest returned to normal. "I could do this all day," Mina beamed with a chuckle. "In fact, if we weren't in class, I would." Izuku blushed somewhat at this. "Mina, that tickles. And we're in the middle of." "Not that this isn't adorable, but you do have a time limit," All Might pointed out. "Which I forgot to mention. My bad. Sorry. You have 8 minutes remaining." The two teams jumped back and tried to act cool just before a familiar screech filled their ears. "Heroes," Ida shouted as menacingly as he could, which wasn't too much. "You will not get past me." Izuku and Mina looked at each other and gave each other a nod. Izuku then wrapped an arm around Mina and flung her upwards, where she surfed on the roof and onto the next floor. "What do you call that?" Izuku asked. "'Cause it looks like my partner just did." To his credit, Ida remained undeterred in spite of mentally berating himself. He moved to chase after Mina, but Izuku zipped in front of him and expanded, blocking the speedster's way and becoming a makeshift curtain. Ida tried to power through, but was sent flying back towards a wall, just barely catching himself. Izuku, after catching his breath, then turned to normal and entered a boxing stance, only for Ida to dash away and then race back to kick his fofo. Izuku wrapped an arm around Tei's offending leg and swung his classmate away, but Ida managed to correct his trajectory and land a blow, which only made Izuku's face push backwards and then back to normal, with some shaking. "Try and keep up, hero," Ida boasted. "All I have to keep is keep you busy." His confidence wavered slightly when his foe seemed amused by his actions and stopped the shaking. "Shame that stretching isn't all I can do, villain," Izuku smirked, suddenly turning into a red copy of Ida's costume and rushing the armored boy, flipping him to the ground and speeding backwards. "I forgot he could shapeshift," Ida weakly thought. MHPM. Did anyone else know he could do that?" Denki asked. The assembled students shook their heads in shock. "Again, Izuku's quirk seems to be crazy strong," Suyu pointed out. "What even is his quirk?" Momo asked. "Stretching, some damage negation, shape-shifting, and a good personality. All Might used to himself. If I hadn't already met Mirio, I have a feeling this boy would have made a great host for One for All. The red and white-haired boy's interest in Izuku piqued. He may be the strongest in our class, after all, he mused. Still, my ice will bring him down. MHPM. While Izuku and Ida had exchanged blows, Mina and Ochako had had a more traditional, but nonetheless exacting fist fight. Mina had won, but for not lacking on Ochako's part. The gravity girl had refused to let Mina get too far, and had used her quirk to float herself and the bomb, forcing the pink-haired girl to skate upwards. Ochako had also used her quirk to make various garbage and rocks float, forming a sort of barrier and surprise attack that the alien girl had barely managed to dodge without too much damage. But finally, with grinning faces on both girls' faces at the realization of how exciting their fight had been, Ochako's stamina had run out, and she was forced to cancel her quirk, sending her and the bomb falling to the ground. Mina had used her acid to cushion the bomb, and then saved Ochako from falling. Good work, Acho-chan. Mina smiled, getting a weak thumbs up. She then offered the girl some of her water bottle, which was gratefully taken. Just as she realized Mina was now touching the bomb. Hero team wins, and without a minute to lose no less. Mina let out a hurrah before helping her friend to her feet, just as Izuku bounced his way up, while carrying Ida on his back. Great work, the stretching boy beamed, getting a high five from the two girls. I'm sorry, Ida and Ochako said to each other, then being shocked at such word. Why are you? You did. I was the one who, okay, knock that off. Peter Piper picked a pick of pickled peppers. Mina couldn't help but squeal at the sight, and Izuku found himself finding the scene adorable as well. Then a beep filled the ears off everyone. And ta'en another. And clicking. The students turned to see a horrifying sight. The bomb was armed and out to blow in 5 seconds. Without a second thought, Izuku elongated his arms, wrapped one around Mina and the other around Ida and Ochako before spinning like a top and tossing them out of the building. 3 seconds remained. He'd never escape in time. And if this bomb was the same type he had read about in all those hero reports, the scale of the explosion could reach his classmates. Young Midoriya, All Might called out, racing towards the site as Izuku then did the stupidest thing he had ever done. He jumped onto the bomb, covering it with his body, now stretched to a parachute-like form. The bomb then exploded, sending Izuku upwards and then back to the ground, barely still on his feet and wobbling. His body was aching in pain. The bomb had been as strong as he had feared, but aside from soot in the room and his costume, there was no damage, so it was worth it. And with pride in what he had done, Izuku made his way towards the main room. Young Midoriya, are you okay? A dazed Izuku, his stomach burned, and he himself barely standing on 2 feet, burped up smoke. Yeah, sure, he responded, fumbling in his steps. I'm fine, All Might. Just heartburn and stars. Oh, there's a ducky, too. He then fell to the ground, a dazed look in his eyes. Izuku, Mina called, rushing to her partner's side. Speak to me. If you see a light, do not go toward it. She got nothing but a groan. Darn it, Freckles, just say something. The pink-skinned girl demanded as she pulled his head upwards, stretching his neck as her eyes glistening with tears. I can't take another scare. Mina, Izuku, half awake and dazed, asked before smiling sweetly. You have beautiful eyes. Mina's face took on a different hue, and for once in her life, she was speechless. For about 2 seconds. He's lost his mind, she shouted in fear and worry, a blush on her face as she dropped Izuku's head, which landed with a thud, and she then picked her friend's head and cradled it until Recovery Girl came to take a better look at the boy. Sadly for the acid user, said blush didn't go unnoticed by Toru, Tsuyu, and Ochako. Ladies, are you pondering what I'm pondering? Ochako started. I think so. But how will we get Gyro to sing a crummy Canadian pop song in the middle of the cafeteria? Toru asked. The other girls looked at her in confusion. Toru's invisible eyes went back and forth before a realization came to her. Oh, you mean? Yes, those two, Tsuyu said. From the corner of the room. The trio smiled evilly. Well, maybe not evilly per se. They had discovered a ship, and were now determined to make it a reality by any means necessary. MHA. The lesson was cancelled in lieu of this. So, the kids had another early day. Aside from some dizziness, and the now missing chest of his costume, Izuku was fine. Great work out there today. Izuku paused at the unfamiliar voice, looking around for its source. Down here. Our hero looked down and saw. It was a face. Under his feet. A smiling face with beady eyes. So, you're him, huh? The face asked with a smile. Izuku reacted as many would in his position, letting out a terrified scream, and then leaping upwards, wrapping his arms around the branch of a nearby tree. Who or what? Oop, sorry about that. The face chuckled as it rose from the ground, revealing that it belonged to a blond boy with a psyche that made Izuku even more self-conscious. Name's Mirio Takada. Pleased to meet you. He reached out to shake THD younger boy's hand. But Izuku was red and turned his head away. Where are your pants? He called out in shock, his head turning into a megaphone as he shouted. Stranger danger, Stran. He then stopped and took a look at the young man, and then recalled his name. Mirio Tagada. Now Izuku remembered him. At the sports festival of the previous year. The one whose clothes kept falling off, and who had placed dead last in all of the events. With a weak chuckle, he shook the older student's hand. Sorry about that. Not a problem, it happens a lot. Forgot I wasn't in my costume. Tagada assured him. Anyways, I just heard about what happened and wanted to meet the hero of the day myself. Didn't mean to spook ya like that. The two smiled, somewhat less awkwardly at each other before Mirio turned around. I gotta head over to my agency, but rest assured, I got my eye on you, Izuku Midoriya. Go beyond. The boy vanished underground, only to pop back up in a costume and disappear again. Izuku chuckled weakly, realizing he had just met his senpai. And, not in that manner. Get your heads out of the gutter. Besides, you saw the pairings. And I already have plans for Mirio's ship Altuf that won't be until the movie Back to the Story. Someone for him to look up to as a stepping point, a goal to reach. Mirio Tagada. With a smile and inwardly wondering if eccentric mannerism were picked up as you went through your years at UA. Izuku morphed into a spring and bounced towards home. MHA. My whole life flashed before my eyes. He reminisced at the dinner table that night, then frowned. It was very boring, and real depressing until the last bit. There was no reason for the Midoriya parents to ponder about the depressing bit of their son's tale of his tale. They still had some resentment in themselves for taking so long to realize the pain their son had gone through for so long. So when he came home that day, Inko hugged the living daylights out of her baby boy, who had unsuccessfully tried to slither away, but was subject to his mother's quirk, until his father came home panting and sweating and demanded to know who he had to sue for putting his son in that position. It had taken until dinner time for Izuku to calm his parents down, and they ordered in before finally listening to their son's side of the story. What were the best parts? Inko asked. This last year mostly. Izuku mused. Dad coming back, finding out my power. He paused and smiled warmly. Meeting Mina. His parents caught this, as did Izuku himself. Just before he could compose himself and offer some explanation that he prayed would convince his parents his reasons were not what they were thinking, even though they probably were. My baby's in love, Inko cried happily as she and Hisashi cupped each other's hands and wept tears of joy. Oh, we are going to have such cute mixed grandbabies with busy hair, Hisashi beamed. then shooting his son a stern look. "Don't screw this up for us, son." And with that, Izuku's appetite was gone. He left without a word while his parents daydreamed of their future grandchildren, turning on his computer to try and take his mind off what had happened with All Might videos. It did not work. Instead, the image of said cute mixed grandbabies with busy hair kept coming into his head. And soon in his eyesight, as his fingers turned into mini combinations of his and Mina's features. Huh. They would look pretty cute, actually, he mused. I wonder I'll save it for tomorrow. MHA. Meanwhile, at the Ishido household, Mina found herself being hounded by her brothers. While she never got tired of little Gordon spending time with her, Naji, who had a free day from college, had gone on to escort her everywhere she went, including the bathroom. For the last time, I'm all right, Mina groaned from within the bathroom, knowing her older brother was outside. No one was hurt. It was probably a mix-up and I'm fine. I don't need you to watch over me like I'm 3 again. Well, sorry, Naji retorted. But hearing that my baby sister nearly got blown up during what was supposed to be training has me on edge. Not a baby, Mina hollered. Speaking of, could put on the TV to channel 14. Gordy's shows are about to start. The young man took his baby brother, who was reaching for Mina, into the living room and did as his sister asked. Naji and Mina were more akin to standard siblings, mostly due to the 7-year gap between them. Naji had teased Mina growing up, and she in turn had made fun of his geeky interests. Still, Naji never forgot the day he skipped school to see his baby sister the day after she had been born. How the second he had seen her, he became filled with a warmth and protective instinct that never truly left him, even when Mina became a little monster of a munchkin and lost her worship of him. So when he heard about the bomb going off, he had postponed any plans to make sure she was okay. Besides, he hadn't seen her in ages, and she didn't want to see him. The nerve. Naji then sat down with Gordon and found himself being filled with nostalgia as an episode he had seen as a kid appeared on TV, just as his parents came in. How goes it, champ? Magi asked his son, sitting down as his wife took her baby and kissed him before going to get started on dinner, while still making sure he could see his shows. Mina's okay. Naji sighed, refusing to talk about what happened, but Izu saved Mina, Gordon beamed happily. This was news for Naji. He was aware that Mina had made friends with some of her classmates and was under the impression she had made a best friend already, but he had never had a name to go with it. Izu? He asked. Who is Izu? And suddenly, an emotion came over Naji Ishido. A sense of protectiveness with a desire to hunt and interrogate. Do I need to? He started. No, Kami, no. Nia frowned as she bounced Gordon. You didn't let me finish. Ma, Naji groaned. Didn't have to, Nia humphed. Izuku is a sweetheart and a cinnamon roll. Magi nodded before adding his own thoughts. Besides, that's my job, and I can't. Why? 'Cause his dad is your business partner. No, because that boy literally doesn't have a bad bone in his body. That and Gordy likes him. Izu, Gordon beamed. Naji sighed and went to his room, passing Mina as he did. If Izuku hurts ya in any way, ya me know, he said. Mina blushed and laughed at that before joining her parents and baby brother. She would then return to her room in embarrassment when Nia brought up Izuku's recurring habit of saving her. MHA. Nezu tentatively took a sip of his tea as he racked his brain trying to solve this conundrum. How did a real bomb manage to be snuck into UA? Power Loader and the support team and students were the first interrogated. A few times a bomb meant for the graduating class's finals had been mixed up with another. It was once in a blue moon, however. There was the fact that Power Loader had made no attempt to hide his dislike towards Izuku Midoriya, the boy who had deactivated a 0-pointer and tossed it the way to a now formerly spotless beach, which had caused US some bad publicity. If only it was that easy. Power Loader was still a hero after all, and while he had cooperated with his boss, made it clear that such a thought had and would never cross his way. Nezu had bought the man's understanding by giving him a raise, which, considering how many explosions that one student, Hatsum he believed, had caused, was probably a good idea. This left only one other option. Someone had broken into Yua and placed the bomb there, likely with the intent of killing. The mouse bear both thanked and cursed that All Might had chosen the teams randomly. Aizawa. The disheveled man nodded and reached for his phone. Hitoshi, are you in the mood for some extra credit and shadowing?